Chapter 20. A Shock for Guy. Guy was unarmed, but for his knife. Its haft glided into his fingers, and he was flinging himself at the Indian when the warrior put his fingers to his lips, warning him to silence. Astounded, Guy checked his leap and stared at him in utter surprise. He could not believe that this wild, painted creature was a friend. The Indian held a bow in his left hand. With his right, he pointed to the canoe, which rode beneath a screen of willows only a few yards away. As Guy gaped at him, he uttered a deep grunt from his belly, and made the motion again. Impatiently, he muttered something. Guy did not understand the words, but his meaning was clear. The brave was telling him to get into the boat and be quick about it. For all his bewilderment, he lost no time. Stealthily he ran along the shore and freed the nose of the craft from the roots in which it was lodged. While he loosened it, he glanced uneasily up at the red man on the bank above him. For the first time, he fancied he saw something familiar in the daubed copper features. One part of his mind wondered vaguely where he had seen him before, but he was too busy to waste time guessing. Quietly, he shoved the canoe off and climbed into the stern. With the steering paddle, he drove the vessel well out into the current before he looked back. The Indian had drawn his bow, with an arrow fitted to the string. A quick thrill ran horridly up Guy's spine. What was happening now? Was this some ghastly kind of trick? He thought the Indian meant to shoot him, but could not understand why he had let him go to the canoe first. As he dug the paddle into the water, bewildered and frantic, the warrior jerked his head in a sign that told him to move faster. The bowstring twanged. Guy braced himself with a sudden knotting of his muscles, expecting the worst. But the arrow whizzed far behind him, skipping out of the water like the flat pebble he had used to skim when he was a child at home, playing drooks and drakes. The Indian was grinning at him, his chest shaking with soundless laughter. All at once it came to him where he had seen him before. It was the catawba he had sent back to his people after the fight outside the stockade. Once again an arrow followed him. This time the shaft hummed wickedly in front of him, too close to his nose to settle his nerves, but he understood by now that it was a deliberate miss. He knew little about Indians, but guessed that it was the catawba's idea of a joke. Now he was in midstream, paddling with all his might. A quick glance back showed him the Indian draw up to his full height on the bank. He flourished the paddle briefly, and saw a hand raised in reply. The catawba had paid his debt. Given back his own life when he expected to lose it, he had now spared Guy's in turn. Guy's heart warmed to him, with an odd respect. Not every man would have been so chivalrous. For all their barbarity, it seemed that Indians could be noble too. All the same, he did not particularly want to meet that catawba again, he felt. His sense of humour was a shade too grim for comfort. The kind of joke that Guy liked best was the kind he could laugh at himself. This point of view was stimulated when the catawba let off an ear-splitting whoop, and began to send arrows as fast as he could bend his bow. Guy judged that he had waited until he felt that his target had had enough law, and was now telling his friends. The howling was taken up, and more Indians appeared on the shore to join in the archery. Guy bent to his paddle, making the light canoe fairly sing through the water as the feathered shaft sleeted after him. By this time he was out of range, but he did not let up on the furious pace until long after the whoops died down. The river broadened as he went down, its strong current aiding him. The canoe flew along, mile after mile, at a rate which the fleetest Indian runner could not equal. After a while he felt calmer, and took a short spell to catch his breath. He was hot and panting, and the exertion had dried his wet clothes. The day was glorious now, the sun warm on the river, and a mild breeze playing through the foliage on the banks. He knelt in the stern with the paddle shipped glancing warily all about him, while he drew deep gulps of air into his lungs. Though he believed now that he was out of danger, he could not be sure. He never wanted to spend another few minutes like those he had just passed through, since he first saw the catawaba glaring at him through the willow leaves. Casually his eye fell on the canoe itself. There was a heap of stuff there. In front of him, furs and blankets and odds and ends. With a quirk of delight surprise, he recognised Eben Willett's rifle. He examined it quickly. It was primed and loaded. There was a pistol too. This was the weapon that Bill Exon had used to rob them. With a sigh of comfort he laid them in front of him, in easy reach. Now, if he were attacked again, he would have a chance to fight back. He had just laid the pistol down when a queer sound made him snatch it up again. It could not happen, he thought. There was nowhere it could possibly have come from, for the noise made him shake in every bone, as he had done in the hut long ago on the night he was captured by the dragoons, and for the same reason. It was a human groan. Gripping the pistol butt, he crouched there listening with all his might. Silence followed. After a while he relaxed and told himself not to be a fool. His adventure had overtaxed his nerves, and he was getting delusions. It would be all right in a minute. Then he heard it again, a thin, weak mutter, plainly audible above the ripple of the water. It arose from somewhere very close to him. It was in the canoe, nowhere else. Paralysed, he fixed his eye on the heap of blankets and duffel in front of him. A leather saddlebag peeped from beneath it, its polish now dull and shabby with hard usage. With a shock he remembered the gold. He had not thought of it until now. It was as if the metal itself was crying out, grieving over the blood and lives that had been spilt because of it. But that was absurd. Guy cocked the pistol deliberately, and got hold of himself with an effort. Leaning forward, he hauled at the nearest blanket corner. A leg revealed itself, shrunken and filthy, clad in tattered linen breeches. He drew a shuddering breath of relief and dragged the blanket clear. In the bottom of the canoe sprawled the body of a man. It was Exon. He was unconscious. The front of his shirt was dark with blood, and he breathed in quick, shallow gasps. There was no doubt that he was very ill. Guy crawled forward and looked at the wound. It had been plugged and bandaged, and was not bleeding any longer. He wondered how the old rogue had come by it. Probably in a brush with the Indians, he decided. If Gil and Flash Cull had had a hand in it, they would not have bothered to fetch him along with them when they turned back. While he looked at the injury, Exon opened his eyes. They were bleared and dim, and showed no sign of recognition. "Water," he croaked. "Give me a drink, for mercy's sake." Guy dipped some out of the river with a little pot, and helped him to sip it. It revived him a little, for his face showed returning intelligence. A hint of his old oily smoothness coloured his voice as he whispered, "Young Guy, by all that's wonderful, how did you get here, kid?" "Lie still and keep quiet. You'll be all right, Bill." Exon looked him over oddly, half unbelievingly. "Well, I'm proper floored to see you again. It is really you, sonny?" "Yes, it's me. Good lad." His good eye was bright with a feverish cunning. "Trust ye to look after poor old Bill. I allus said you was a right un, a proper pal, if you remember." Guy recalled what he was going downstream for, and seeing that his companion was as comfortable as could be expected under the conditions, he went back to the stern. He started to paddle again, putting his back into the strokes. Soon the canoe was clipping along. He wondered how long it would take to reach help. Prone in the bottom, Exon watched him. It was a while before he spoke again. At length he squeezed out a dry mutter. "Where did you say the others was, young un? Why ain't they here?" Guy did not know what to tell him. He could not bear to think of the fate of Gill and Flash Cull, let alone talk about it. "We was shoving along nicely when they started shooting them arrows at us," Exon babbled on. "Clouds of 'em, buzzing and whooshing from the banks. I got one in the slats, and we turned round and scarpered back again downstream." His words trailed off, and he gazed vacantly in front of him. His mind was wandering. "Sarah," he whispered. "Sarah, my gal, nip down the alley and fetch us a mutton pie, there's a duck. A hot 'un, mind, none of their stale rubbish." Back in some warren of London slums, the sick wretch licked his lips feverishly. Later he began again, talking of the Indian ambush where he had got his hurt. "Seth had to break it off and poke it clean through me, afore he could get it out. It was barbed, you see." He frowned in a puzzled manner. "Where is Seth, anyway? And Miles? Where are they, Guy?" Guy said nothing. A glitter of suspicion and anger burned suddenly under the half-closed lids. "They've gone, ain't they?" Exon put it as a statement rather than a question. "Slung their blinking hooks and forsook poor old Bill." All at once he struggled to sit up, eyes dilating. He stared wildly, and his voice rose to a hoarse yelp. "The gelt!" he raved. "The money!" "Lie still, or you'll open your wound again," Guy said, as gently as he could, but Exon would not be pacified. "The pair of twices!" he gritted savagely. "They took it with them, didn't they? Didn't they? I say!" There had been times when Guy hated Exon fiercely, because the old rogue had been the cause of many of his troubles, but now he found it hard to be vindictive, seeing him so broken and helpless. "The money's here," he soothed. "Here in the canoe." He touched it with his knee, and Exon sank down again with a gasp of relief. "So, you flamed 'em, did you, boy? Got it out from 'em after all, you cunning young rascal. But you'll go shares with Bill, though, won't you?" The old wheedling was full in force, but Guy noticed his clawed fingers groping around him under the skins and blankets. He knew what it was searching for. "The pistol's here too, Bill," he snapped. "Don't waste time looking for it." The old convict cursed wickedly. He lay back now in defeat and glared hatred out of his single good eye. "What do you mean to do?" he pleaded. "You can't take it nowhere. Sink me, kid. We're in a pretty coil. 5,000 guineas to spend and nowhere to blow it. It's a fair leveller, ain't it?" "You're levelled for good this time, you poor old scoundrel," Guy brooded. Aloud he said, "There's a town not far below us, according to Smeaton. What's it called, and how far?" A chuckle sounded in Exon's throat, like a dried pea rattling. "Weldon," he replied, "and well done's what we'll be if you go there. We milled a crib on the outskirts to get some grub, and Seth tapped the man of the house with his cosh when he started to squeal." He meant that they had broken into a house to steal food, and that Gill had bludgeoned the owner to stop him crying out. "Well, we are going there," Guy told him. "You'll be taken care of, and your wound seen to." "Aye, and you'll be took care of, too," was the bitter answer. Exon spat feebly. "You're as bad as them others, ratting on poor Bill. But it'll do you no good, my buck. It'll be the scragging cheat for us both, the rope."